All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today, before we start the show, I would like to bring up some business things that have kind of been on my mind so that you can know where to get more Where Am I to Go. First off, I'd like to talk about the Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast. It's on Facebook, and we've been posting some wonderful pictures of some of the places that we've been and some of the adventures that we've had. Not everything that we go and do is made into a podcast, and so we take pictures at different places and post those pictures so that you guys can enjoy some of the different places we've been. Also, I really am interested in listener feedback. I have an email address at whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of the listeners' comments and some of their ideas of places that might be interesting to visit and go and do. I'm on kind of a limited travel schedule as far as the way that I travel and where I go, but if there's something extremely interesting, I would definitely do my best to build a trip around it. And the last thing, and the latest thing, is that I now have a Patreon account where if you want to hear the podcast early, you can go to Patreon/Loren Alberts, sign up for $3, $5, $10, whatever dollars if you were willing to support what I do and help us with our travel expenses and some of that kind of stuff. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. But what we're going to do is right now I have several podcasts that are banked, I guess you could say. I'm on, I think, number 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there, and I've got close to 35 that I have waiting to go out. I only put out about every week because I want to be able to keep a nice steady stream and not have a point in time when we have to shut down like a lot of other podcasts do for season 1, season 2. I'd like to keep this thing going year round. And I've been traveling quite a bit and have been hitting quite a few interesting places. We've been to a tattoo museum. We've been to the beach and have gone to several tourist attractions there, an underground tour. We did a cannery tour. We've just done all kinds of things, and I would love for you to be able to hear those early. So if you sign up with the Patreon, as soon as my editor Steve gets these things ready to go out, they will be put up on the Patreon page. And again, I would really appreciate your support. Now that I've got those things out of the way, I hope to hear from you, and I hope you keep on listening. And now, let's get on with the podcast. Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today we're in Joseph, Oregon. We're at the Joseph Community Museum. What is the name of it?
It's called Wallowa County Museum.
Wallowa County Museum.
Right. It was the first bank of Joseph.
Okay. And we are here with Jude. She is going to take us through this fantastic little museum. And we're going to talk about a lot of the displays. She's got some really interesting things here that I have never seen before. And we're going to talk about some of the displays, and we're going to talk about some of the history of this county. But before we get started, let's talk about the area in general, because Joseph is a cute little town. You've got Enterprise just a little ways away. You've got the Eagle Cap Wilderness area right close. You've got Wallowa Lake. You've got all kinds of recreation. Tell us a little bit about what you've got here as far as areas for somebody to come visit, because it's kind of out of the way. It's north of Interstate 84 or 80. I don't know what it's called.
84.
84. It's north of Interstate 84 by probably an hour, hour and a half, but it's definitely worth the visit. The scenery's great, and give us some recreational hints.
Okay, so Wallowa County is in the northeast corner of Oregon. If you can imagine a map of Oregon, it kind of butts up to Idaho and Washington. From the town of Joseph, you can see the Seven Devils in Idaho on a clear day. We sit at about 4,100 feet in town, and our mountains go up to about 9,000 feet. Wallowa Lake Tram is up at Wallowa Lake. It's a wonderful tram up to the top of one of the mountains, and they have a little restaurant up there, and you can walk all over the mountains. We have a lot of lakes in the high mountains that hikers love to walk to. It is the Eagle Cap Wilderness, as you said. There's about 40 some odd lakes you can hike to. The highest is Lagore, and there's actually natural garnets up there,
Wow.
which are pretty amazing. You can find them in the scree up there. There were gold mines in the county, not too much anymore. A lot of hiking trails. The main street of Joseph is filled with cute little boutique shops. We're the home of Chief Joseph Days, which is a rodeo, which happens the last full weekend of August each year. So we have a lot of events here. You can go down to the Snake River through Imnaha. There's a little tavern down there. That's
We just went to Imnaha today. We ate there at the little tavern.
Yeah,
the
it's
food was
great.
very good. The drive was absolutely gorgeous, and Imnaha is a neat little town.
It is, you are correct. And it's on a little river down there. We have fly fishermen. Wallowa Lake is about 282 feet deep. So we have great kokanee. In fact, the world record kokanee was caught in Wallowa Lake a number of years ago.
Wow.
And we have trout and mackinaw on the lake, so kind of a fisherman's paradise. The lake was carved out by glaciers, and it has one of the most perfect example of terminal and lateral moraines anywhere. So it's quite a sight to see.
Okay, that sounds awesome. And like I said, it's a pretty drive to get here. Well worth the trip. Spend a day. It's very nice. So let's talk about your museum. You said that it is in the first bank that was here in the county?
Right. It's the first bank of Joseph, and it was built in 1888. It's a two-story building. And for those of you that really like architecture, the style is Italianate, which was kind of rare out in this part of the country. It is an interesting bank building. We have really tall windows, 13-foot ceilings. A lot of the original light fixtures are still in here, and the layout of the bank is as it was originally. The only thing we've done is we've brought the stairway indoors. The stairway used to be outside.
Okay. And then you said the building also had a history as a community center upstairs and then a hospital or a doctor's office?
Right. The whole place, the bottom floor was a bank, and the upstairs was a community center. They would have dances and board meetings and things like that up there. Then after the bank closed, a doctor took over, and the downstairs was doctor's office, and the upstairs was a kitchen and recovery rooms for patients. And at one point, it was a one-room schoolhouse upstairs. So there's a very long, all-slate blackboard, the full length of the upstairs.
And still a lot of school items that are up there
Yes.
from when this was a school. And there's a lot of bank items from when it was a bank. So
Absolutely. The original vault is downstairs, and people can walk through it with a lot of the old ledgers and stuff in there. We have some wonderful saloon items. We have a beautiful free lunch counter like people have never seen, with curved glass doors. It was in a saloon, and if you bought a beer, you got free lunch, and you could go make it yourself for the purchase of a beer.
I was looking at this piece. It looks like it has an icebox on top. It's probably 8 foot tall and about probably 8 foot long, but it's got curved glass windows. I'm assuming those lift up like the old roll top desks. Oh yeah. And then it has a slide that comes out that you could have your sandwiches or whatever it was that they were serving that day. And then you've got the icebox up on top to keep everything cool.
Right.
This is really a neat piece of furniture.
Yeah, it was in a local saloon, and when the saloon closed, they gave it to the museum. So it's kind of a fun piece. So the downstairs is a combination of bank items with the teller's counters and the bank vault and such.
And you've got a poker table set up here.
Yep.
Just as you walk in. And how much is this museum, just out of curiosity?
It's $4 unless you're a senior citizen, and then it's $3.
Dang, that's too affordable.
It's very reasonable. Yes.
And then you have several books here, kind of a gift area, but these are in an old display counter that's got glass front.
Yes.
And then you've got several typewriters and the old style cameras and some of that in another display case. And then we move down to the next one, and you've got some fossils.
Yeah, some mammoth molars and vertebrae from dinosaurs.
Mammoth molars. Did
yeah.
those come from here?
Yes, they were all dug up here. Everything in the museum came from here in the county.
Wow.
Every item in here, whether it's the Native American artifacts or the pictures or whatever.
And you've got a lot of pictures here on the wall.
We have a ton of pictures.
You do have a ton of pictures. Everywhere there's pictures. If you're into seeing old pictures and the way things were done in bygone days, this has a pictorial history that is just phenomenal. And then you said that you have the president's office.
Yes.
And the president must have been highly regarded because his office is all of about 8 by 8. And they're
Yes.
using this for a storage room right now.
Yes, we are.
But you can see that. And then also the vault had some really interesting things in it. She opened up the vault for us a little bit earlier. And they've got a beautiful picture. And that's an original picture that's on there?
Yes, it is. And the vault actually has double doors going in and amazing etched metalwork on it.
Oh, yeah. There's flowers and
Yes.
all kinds of scroll work done on this, all engraved into steel.
One of the fun things we found recently was the 1908 Presidential Ballot for William Howard Taft, and it's not filled out yet.
Oh, really?
No, it's blank. So it was an extra ballot from 1908. But all of the books in here are ledgers from the bank and local businesses from about 1887 to about 1940 in here.
Okay.
And post office things.
And then you've got another display case over here. And the thing that I saw that was really interesting or caught my eye was the leather fire helmets.
Yes. Leather was fireproof for the firemen, and on the top of the helmet is a brass eagle that is holding up the banner that says Joseph Fire Department, and that brass eagle was actually used for breaking glass when they needed to. So they're beautifully preserved, and a fire hose, and a lot of items like banks, certificates, checkbooks, that type of thing.
And then I see a picture.
Yes.
And this picture is of Dave and Minnie Tucker.
Yes.
And there's a story behind this that she's going to tell us while we're walking on into the next area where we're going.
Absolutely. So Dave Tucker was a local resident, and in 1896 he wanted to marry his sweetheart, Minnie. Did not have enough money for a wedding ring. And he met two tourists that happened to be not very savory people, and they talked him into robbing this very bank in 1896. So he was one of the two locals that was asked to rob the bank, and of the four men that robbed the bank, one of the drifters got away with $2,000. Another drifter was shot and killed. The two locals were arrested and spent a number of years in jail, including Dave Tucker. So after he got out of jail, he came back and he married Minnie and bought a little ranch. And about 20 some odd years later, he had redeemed himself in the community, and he became an investor in the bank that was the successor bank to this one. And after he became an investor, they made him vice president of the bank that he had robbed. And the town wasn't concerned at all. They thought it was just fine.
And your statement was, Joseph is the only place where you can rob the bank and become the vice president?
You're right. You are right.
That's a really good story, I think. Okay, now we came into
my Western room, and in this room there's a wide variety of items. Everything in the museum was used here in the county, and so we have hay lifts, fence looms, bucking bronco saddles, all kinds of items, a couple of safes, printer presses, two women's saddles that were actually side saddles, and if you don't know what that is, look it up. I used to ride horse a lot, and there was no way I would ever get on a side saddle. And,
you never did try the side saddle?
No, I did not.
My daughter rides quite a bit,
Yes.
and she always wanted a side saddle, and so she would ride side saddle, but then she wanted to try jumping. And she actually was able to jump in the side saddle.
That's amazing. Usually the women fell off on the ground, and the man was the hero and would come save them. So,
but a side saddle, just so that you know what it is, you sit sideways so that you're dressed, so that you don't have to be straddled in a dress across your saddle to ride it like the men did. You rode it off to the side. It has kind of a horn a split horn that you're able to wrap your arm around or grab onto or whatever for a little bit of balance. But you were sitting sideways with both legs off the same side of the horse.
Yes, yes. And then we have a World War I cavalry saddle that is just beautiful here. So there's a lot of branding irons. We have one really unusual branding iron that was made for a rancher, and it actually looks, it's supposed to be kind of a smiley face, but it looks like skull and crossbones, which is one you'll never see anywhere. So a lot of items down in here, including stills. We had a lot of stills in the area, clear up into the late 50s and early 60s, especially down towards Imnaha. Stills were pretty prevalent down there. And it's just an interesting part of Western history.
You got a press here for printing.
Yes. We had a number of newspapers in the county. Almost every town, Wallowa, Lostine, Joseph, and Enterprise, they all had their own newspapers. And so we do have a printing press in here. A lot of stone grinders, blacksmithing tools, of course.
And even a few pairs of woolly chaps.
Yes, some woolly chaps. You got to have those. This would have been the 75th anniversary of Chief Joseph Days, which they're going to celebrate next year. So we have a whole tribute exhibit to that.
And what exactly was Chief Joseph Days?
Chief Joseph Days is a rodeo. It lasts about 5 days, always the last full weekend of July every year. And so you can look it up on your calendar and see this year when it's coming up. If you like PBR rodeos, it's kind of interesting. We're going past something that is kind of fun. It's a dive helmet made in 1926.
Holy smokes.
The dive helmet weighs 70 pounds, is all steel, and they actually used it to dive in Wallowa Lake, and it's something you just kind of have to see.
And how deep did that go? You said Wallowa Lake was 270 feet deep?
282, but they didn't go that deep. They walked around at the other end of the lake a little bit, and at this end, the town end of the lake, and they did not go super deep because of the oxygen and stuff, and how long their cable was that allowed them to go down.
Now this helmet, I've scuba dived a little bit, and I've been to a couple of dive museums. I have never seen anything like this. It looks like a tree that's 15 inches in diameter, and it's 2 foot tall, and has a mask window on it that's probably 6 by 10, and I don't know what this great big nose looking thing is, but it looks just like a great big tree face that people carve.
Yes, it does.
Wow, and it weighs 75 pounds.
Yes, it's amazing.
It is. That's worth being to the museum just to see this thing. I am just flabbergasted here.
I sent a picture of it to a dive company I've been diving with before, and they had the same experience you did, that it's just amazing to see. And now we're in the Nez Perce room. The Nez Perce Indians lived here. They were kind of the first summer visitors to Wallowa County. They lived around the Pacific Northwest, and probably the most famous stories of Chief Joseph. And Chief Joseph in the War of 1877, it was the battle where he went 1,400 to 1,500 miles up towards Canada to try to save his tribe. And it's when the white man started to kind of take over Wallowa County at that time. So old Chief Joseph is actually buried at Wallowa Lake. His grave is up there. He was buried in the town of Wallowa, and in about 1926, the tribe decided to move his body to the lake, and so he is interred there.
Okay, and in this room you have a teepee that's all set up, canvas.
Yes.
You said that you had this stone or set of stones so that kids could practice grinding grain.
Absolutely. It's, we see mortars and pestles and we see the stone grinding situation, but very seldom do you actually get to try it, to figure out how long it takes and what effort it takes. So we'll put corn down and let the kids grind corn, and it's pretty amazing to see their expression after they've done it. And they start to understand what it takes to make this.
Yeah, it doesn't just come in a bag at the store.
No, it does not.
And then you've got a horse with a travois behind it.
Yes.
That is a set of poles that comes on back with a carrying place so that they could carry their belongings on long treks.
Right.
Now, is this what they were doing when they were fleeing from... I'm assuming they were fleeing from the cavalry.
They were fleeing from the cavalry, and there were some travois, but they were fleeing fast. So a lot of things were left behind and not taken with them during that run when they went up to Canada. And some of them actually made it to Canada. And I believe young Chief Joseph's daughter was about the only one that made it all the way back to Lapway in that area from Canada. So they dispersed in Canada, and then some of them didn't make it all the way to Canada. So there's a lot of different stories about how they dispersed at that time.
And were there skirmishes on this whole
Yes.
trail ride?
Yes.
And
there's all kinds of accounts. One of my favorite books was written by a man named Alvin Josephi, who is now deceased, but you can still find his books online and buy them, and they are amazing accounts. Alvin actually spent time with Nez Perce elders and talked to them about the stories and got more firsthand quotes than I think anyone else did.
Okay, and what was the name of that book again?
Alvin Josephi, like the word Joseph, only with a Y.
Okay.
Josephi, and he wrote a number of books.
Just okay.
Yes, but they're excellent for people to buy and understand the Nez Perce trials and tribulations.
Now, were there any victories on the Nez Perce side on the way, or was most of this just slaughter on the way to Canada?
So, yes, there were some victories. And one of the victories was, for a long time, West Point taught Chief Joseph's battle plan at West Point.
Oh,
because
really?
they found it so amazing. And I found that a great trivia piece about the skill of this man. And then, he surrendered, and that's that famous quote, "I will fight no more," from Chief Joseph. It was a really heartwarming story. And so this is kind of the start of it. There were other skirmishes before they left this area, too, in other areas.
Okay.
But at that time in our country's history, a lot of native tribes were having skirmishes over property. And wars and such.
And animals, hunting grounds. And
yes,
all of
and
that.
hunting
Yes,
grounds.
Yes.
There were a lot of great stories about Chief Joseph's men and women and how they got along with the white people here in the county. And A.C. Smith was one of the people, and the McCulley family were a couple of the people that the Nez Perce had great bonds with here in the county. So it wasn't all one way. It was very sad, and there were a lot of deaths and a lot of stories about that. But there were some excellent times before the war started between the people, and even stories about watching cattle. Chief Joseph would watch somebody's cattle, some white person's cows, or vice versa, or something, during the months where they weren't all here. So it's such a long history, and so passionate on both sides. So we do this room as a tribute to the Nez Perce tribe that had this area. We have some beautiful beadwork, leather and beadwork, that are all Nez Perce. Of course, some arrowheads, some mortar and pestles. The longest pestle we have is about 20 inches long, which was
Wow.
an amazing length. We have Columbia Basin basalt outcroppings here. So there's a lot of items that come from that. And a really nice berry picking basket and a piece of rope that was all handmade by the Nez Perce down here.
And this basket's really cool. It's got kind of a concave bottom and it's wrapped. The thing's 12 inches long and probably 6 inches in diameter, and has some rawhide straps that come on up for carrying. I've never seen anything quite like that. I think it's a really neat piece that you've got here. It caught my eye.
It's amazing. One piece that will be coming out for next summer is a piece that's yet to be identified. And if you thought of the shape of kind of a cross, but with the ends of the upright bar more pointed, and it's carved out of Columbia Basin basalt and completely smooth. And we've showed it to a lot of museums, and nobody has a clue what it was used for. So it's going to be an interesting one. Nobody's seen one like it. We've identified the rock as coming from this area, but nobody's quite certain. And the best guess is that it was used for smoothing out leather, and that will be out here next year. Plus a poison dart quiver.
Oh, really?
We got, yes.
And what were they using for the poison?
So they used a couple of different flowers, and I'll probably mispronounce this. It was like drury flower. It was a white flower that almost looked like a 5-petaled white flower that they used. And so they used a lot of different things, saps from trees and such. And it's got almost a heavy grass that is the dart, and like some lamb's wool that's wrapped around the tip, and then a ball mounted on the quiver that the lamb's wool and the poison was in, and you dip it in that and use the poison darts. And it's a very unusual piece. So it was found here in Wallowa County in about 1900 and was given to a historian at that time, who then his family passed it on to us. So we can track it back to about 1900.
Wow.
But it'll be out here next year.
And I knew that they did the poison dart thing down in South America and some of those areas. I had no idea that it was part of the native culture here.
Yeah, and the Cherokees did it a lot, and so it's been very fun kind of tracking down the history of it, and very similar looking to the South American ones. But remember, the Native Americans traded with everybody.
Right.
You know, if the Nez Perce, if they could get in a boat and go down a river or up a river, they would trade with them, you know. And so there were things in all different areas that came from other tribes, not just war trophies.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's take a look outside real quick.
Okay.
We're right here.
Okay.
And out the back door here, she showed me a little bit earlier that they have the women's prison cell.
Yes.
And yeah, this thing's like 6 by 6, maybe. And it's just bands of steel that look like 1/4-inch steel that's 2.5-inch steel and pretty well reinforced. But you were saying that there weren't many women that were imprisoned here.
Well, there couldn't be, just from the size of the jail. And I think that that's probably a good sign. But it is very heavy, and
There's not even room for somebody to sleep in there.
No, if you look at this, it is heavy doors, and you can stand up, but an average person could not lay down in it.
Wow.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
Yep.
The conditions, we did a prison museum in Deer Lodge, Montana, and they were talking about the difference between the women's prison and the men's. Now I think we think that the women's prison was a lot nicer than the men's, but back in the day, the women really had it so much tougher than what the men did.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then you've got a sheep herder's wagon out here, and some old saws, some old double-handled saws.
Yep. Yeah, variety.
And these
of
ones
items.
here are pretty doggone big. I guess that's because the trees up here are pretty big.
They're pretty big, yeah. And back in those days, man, you had to be tough to do anything out in the West. And, you know, I was talking to some kids the other day who were touring the museum, and we were talking about the washing machines. And we actually have a washing machine upstairs that you rock the handle back and forth, and there's kind of a cradle that holds the clothes. And I spoke to a woman who had used one when she was a small child. She was almost 100 years old. And she said you had to rock that cradle for an hour for this small load of clothing in order to get it clean. So, you know, nowadays we push on and we push start and we go about our lives. But
Right.
you had to stand there and rock that.
Well, but they were
for that whole
probably
time.
really happy to have that one versus the washboard.
Exactly.
You know, I mean, everything was an improvement. The washboard took you 2 hours to do that same load of clothes.
Exactly.
And so I guess it was, hey, we're uptown now. And then we
Yeah.
just came up a set of stairs coming to the upstairs of this museum. And there's several pictures of churches and some of the older settlers, I'm assuming, here.
Right?
And some of that. And lots of neat pictures, old pictures.
All of these photos are of people from the county.
Okay. Picture of the first settler at Enterprise, W.M. Bennett. And he's standing there with his legs crossed and in a top hat. Just neat pictures.
Oh, yeah.
And then we get to something that's really fascinating. When we were at the prison museum in Deer Lodge again, they were talking about how the hangings or the executions were an item of community gatherings.
Yes.
And she just so happens to have 4 invitations to hangings hanging on the wall. And these are the actual invitations that people received so that they could come on down and witness a hanging.
Exactly. They had to have so many people in order to do the hanging. They had to have so many witnesses. And these 4 were sent to our county sheriff. And it tells the person's name and what crime they committed. And then when they're going to be hung. And the sheriff would have to send an RSVP, as it were, that he was coming before they could plan the day of the hanging, because of the number of witnesses they needed. In each county, the number of witnesses would change.
Okay, now was the community also invited, or did they just show up, or?
Both. You know, some areas it was only invited people, depending on the county you were in or the city you were in, and sometimes people would just show up to witness the hanging. These 4, one of the most interesting ones, I've always heard that sometimes people are like their name. And this guy's name is Pleasant Armstrong, and I kind of have a feeling since he murdered some people, he wasn't very pleasant. But
I guess you can get away with murder if you have the right name.
yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Talk about pulling the wool over people's eyes.
Oh, yeah. So some very interesting pictures. One of the kind of fun ones that we just recently hung up is during Prohibition, and they're actually pouring bottles of what look like whiskey or wine in the sewer grates in the street during Prohibition. And that's how in Enterprise, Oregon, they got rid of all the alcohol. They just poured them down the sewer drains.
Wow. And they didn't have anybody hanging out down below to take sips.
No.
I know a lot of these towns have undergrounds that...
Yes, and we actually don't have an underground here. We're one of the very few. There was a silent movie filmed here in May of 1925, and it was called Winds of Chance. It was filmed at Wallowa Lake, and it was about an Alaskan gold rush. You can find it on YouTube and watch it. It's silent. I'll give you the warning. There's no sound, not even any background piano music, but it was filmed up there. We had a couple of movies filmed in the area over the years.
Okay, and that one was called Winds of Chance.
Yes.
In 1925, and you said it's on YouTube.
Yes, it's on YouTube.
A lot of those old films are just really fun to watch just because they're kind of fast-paced and yeah, it leaves a lot to the imagination and at the same time shows you a lot.
Yes,
They're
you're exactly
fun.
right.
They're fun.
So we're at a place now, we're upstairs, and this part was a schoolroom, as I told you, for a long time, and there's a pure slate blackboard. And we had 90 one-room schoolhouses in Wallowa County back in the day. So it's kind of interesting to see where they were and see some of the children and the instructors and what the schoolhouse looked like. There's a few of them that aren't much more than a one-room log building and or a tiny shack, and that's where they went to school.
Is this Flora School still standing?
Yes.
I was going to say, back when I was a kid, we used to come over this way elk hunting back in the mid-'70s. And I remember seeing that school because we used to hunt up in the Flora area.
They and once a year, Flora School will do like a Pioneer Day up there.
Oh, really?
And they'll have blacksmiths out there. We have a gentleman here in town that actually won Forged in Fire. His name's,
really?
Yeah, his name's Mike Rowley. And if you remember the Forged in Fire episodes, if you're a fan, they did one where the person had to build 2 tomahawks that you could smoke. And Mike Rowley from Enterprise actually won that competition. And he will go out to Flora School Days and show blacksmithing out in the middle of the field by the school. And they'll have people making quilts. And it's a lot of fun that they still do those old heritage things.
Yes. And then I see the Troy School. Troy's kind of a not there anymore community, isn't it?
Well, no, Troy's still there. They have a lot of people who go fishing down there.
Right.
And for a while, and I'm not certain right now, but for a while, Shiloh Inns owned the little motel there. I'm not certain if they still do, but there's a little motel that you can stay, and a little restaurant, and a grocery store. And that's about what's in town.
I guess I only made it down to the river crossing. Maybe I never went all the way into Troy.
Troy is not easy to get to.
Yeah. No, it's a interesting ride just getting down to the river.
Yes.
It's steep, and I don't know if it's still gravel, but it was gravel.
It's
and
gravel.
would usually take you 45 minutes to get from where the pavement was down to Troy. And then it was a chore. I mean, it was all uphill and wheels spinning and the gravel coming back out. But like I said, I may not have ever made it all the way to the town. I know I made it down to the river several times.
Yeah, it's actually a beautiful river, and some great fly fishing down there. There's some gorgeous ranches down there that are along the river that aren't very close to town. But it's one of the few places you'll find, if you get there at the right time of the year, they have an enormous hatch of monarch butterflies.
Oh, really?
And if you're there at the right time, you'll see 1,000 monarch butterflies flying in the air. It's pretty amazing to see.
Another reason to come to this area.
Yes, there's lots of them.
There's so much history here, and so many little towns that just kind of aren't here anymore. Paradise was another one that was out there someplace. That
yes, you're right.
And anyway, so you have some school desks here. It looks like several different styles.
Yes.
One of them had a bad kid sitting in it because his initials are carved all over the place, but the other ones look to be pretty good. You've got a chalkboard on one of the older ones.
Yeah, an old slate, and this is actually how the kids would do their classwork, is on slate boards like this. And they're pure slate. You can see the crack in this one. We have a couple others that are put away that are in pristine condition, but we do let kids draw on this just to see how they would do their work during days. It wasn't on paper.
Now, what vintage is this desk?
This desk is late 1800s.
Late 1800s. And what we're looking at is a little, does it have a lift top so that you can, okay, so it's a little solid desk with a little chair that sits behind it, freestanding, almost looks, well, the top on it's probably 20 by 24, and it's got a 12 by 8 chalkboard that sits right in the middle of it.
Right.
Along with an eraser.
Yes.
Did every desk have an eraser also?
No. The kids would use their hands.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I guess if you wanted to erase it and didn't want to use your hands, you could get in trouble, and when the teacher threw the eraser at you, you could erase real quick.
Yeah.
Not that I know anything about erasers flying. Okay, and then you were telling about this Oregon educational exhibit. Now, this is really, really fascinating. We've got a box that is probably 3 foot by 3 foot, has a really nice glass-etched glass in it with a picture of a school, Wallowa School. And this exhibit, you were saying, was a traveling exhibit of sorts?
So in 1905, there was what you might call a World's Fair now. At the time, it was called the Lewis and Clark Centennial exhibition in Portland. And this exhibit, this whole wood box, went to Portland and was part of the displays. So if you went to Portland in 1905, you could walk through and you could see this exhibit. And it has a door that you can open, and inside are about a dozen panels, and on each panel is schoolwork from Wallowa County children. This first panel is first graders, and it shows music and 3/8 chords, and
it has all the different notes on it.
Yeah, it has the different notes. And in cursive writing, this first grade child said the rests are 8 rests, okay? And it's in beautiful cursive penmanship. So
This is like in better penmanship than what I think anybody in my class had in 4th and 5th grade. This
Yes.
cursive is just unbelievable, and they were teaching this in 1st grade.
You're absolutely correct. It's just,
Did they teach print in kindergarten, or was that mom and dad's responsibility to teach them before they got there? Because we had a year and a half or 2 years just working on the cursive.
So back in the day, there really wasn't a kindergarten. Some little kids, if the family was in such a position that they couldn't watch the tiny children, the little children might go to a one-room schoolhouse with an older sibling, but there really wasn't such a thing as kindergarten or preschool back in those days. Yeah, most of them stayed home and helped mom with chores at those young ages. So if they learned any penmanship or anything, it had to be from the parents before. And as you said, this is amazing cursive. And all through these dozen pages are incredible items, such as there's one where first graders learned to stitch, and they were actually sewing through cardboard. There's pictures of like a sheep that a second grader did, and it's an excellent drawing of a sheep.
Excellent. And the flowers are excellent.
Oh, yes.
I mean, just the fish, they've got so many things that are,
Just
do I really
incredible.
want to say beyond my skill level? But they are first graders doing stuff that I honestly could not repeat right now. But I'm not an artist, and my writing, I just don't do enough of it to where my writing isn't pretty anymore. I don't know that it ever was pretty, but you know,
and that's a very common statement. And when we're showing this to young children or school teachers, the school teachers are just amazed. There's some maps of Australia that were done by 8th graders, and they are incredible. You can see the Hawaiian Islands, you can see Australia and all the outlying islands, and they're all drawn by hand. And in those
But
days,
you're missing the one point that I see here.
Yes.
And that is they're topographical.
Yes,
They've
you're
got
right.
the topographical lines going off the coast.
You're right.
It's
It's just beyond belief, and that was 8th graders. And generally, that came because your school teacher was a great teacher.
One other thing that you had in here was back in the day, we've talked about it, I think, when we've been to different ghost towns and seen some different old buildings. What they would put on the ceilings and the walls is stretched canvas.
Yeah.
Well, they've got some examples of some of this stretched canvas that was hand painted by the 8th graders, and the details for the wallpaper, which is, I guess, what you would call it, wall canvas something, is just phenomenal too.
Oh, yeah. Little tiny flowers with leaves on vines and just amazing drawings. And a lot of times, the teachers had to have art skills so the kids could copy it, because the teacher would draw that design on the blackboard, then the kids would copy it onto their paper. And it's very difficult to understand how much skill that teacher had to have. In lots of small areas, there were not books for the teachers. They would come to that small area to teach with whatever they had. There were no school books, you know. A lot of times there were no libraries. And lots of times the wealthy people, if they traveled out of the county, would bring a book back. So the teacher would borrow that book in order to teach their children and then give it back to that wealthy person. It's not like today where every student is given a book.
Right.
A book was hard to come by and a rare commodity. So it's a very different mindset on how class happened. But you've also got to remember that those little kids were in a class with 8th graders and such.
You're right, the one-room school.
Yeah, so those older kids who had been in school longer would help teach the little kids too. And it took a whole community to make that education.
See, and I always thought my grandma was extremely smart.
Uh-huh.
But grandma would always say, I only had a 3rd grade education.
Right.
And I'm going, how can grandma be that smart when she missed the other
Yes.
9 grades?
Yeah.
But when you're looking at this and you're seeing the math skills that are demonstrated in there and the writing skills and everything else, it's amazing.
Yes,
It's very amazing.
It is. You're absolutely correct.
And then you've got a old Singer treadle sewing machine here.
Yes. Yeah.
And is that a military?
No, it is. This is actually a tux that was worn to a wedding. And it's his wedding suit with the wedding bow tie
Okay.
on it. And it's circa 1900.
Okay. And then you've got some other pictures of guys wearing some pretty nice looking suits.
Right. And some original patterns from the late 1800s. Some of the dress patterns have bustles and such.
And as long as we're on clothing, you've got some female mannequins over here wearing
Yes.
some early 1900 dress.
Yes. And then the black dress is actually a wedding dress
Oh, really?
from the early 1900s. People think that always women wore white at weddings. That was not quite so, because they would wear the dress for other things. And this was 1884, and it was her wedding dress. And that is the hat instead of a veil that she wore at the wedding.
Now, I would have never ever thought of a black wedding dress.
No,
A funeral
no.
dress, yes.
Yeah.
But then you told me that you also have a dress here that is very unique and special.
Yes, this dress, I wish people could see it. It's incredible. It's got layers of satin and layers of lace and ruffles and handmade roses cascading down from the waist. And it's
Kind of a
fitted
golden
waist.
color.
Yeah, gold with white lace, and the lace is handmade. And it was actually worn in 1888 to Henry Ford I's wedding back east. A lady here in town was invited to the wedding, and she and her mother made this incredible dress that is encased in an oak case here so people can see it. And it's quite amazing to see.
And then we come on over here to what I can only describe as an electric chair. I've seen these before, and every time I see them, it looks like the most horrendous machine you could ever be, or contraption that you could be hooked up to, but it's an old perm machine. And
Yes.
it sits about 6 foot tall and has wires hanging down all over the place with little clips on the end. And this is an electric perm machine.
It is. These metal clips were wrapped in the hair, and they would try to keep it away from the scalp. And sometimes they would actually remember to put rubber or some cloth between the scalp and the clip. And after you got about 25 clips in your hair, somebody would plug you into the wall and hopefully unplug you before your hair totally fried off. And it was quite infamous. I'm not going to say famous, but it was pretty interesting. It does look like a torture machine, but they actually thought they would, this is the beautician's size because it's big. They actually thought that people might buy a portable one to take home with them, so we have the portable one also.
And I have never ever seen the portable one.
Yes.
This one here is small. She says it weighs 25 pounds. And it's probably 10-inch diameter and stands 8 inches tall. But again, has all the wires coming out the side, has all the little clips for curling your hair, and a timer.
Yeah.
Oh, maybe you won't burn your hair with that one.
Maybe, but here's the meter that you can put more voltage through it or less voltage. And yeah, it's quite unique. Something that is along that line that we didn't talk about, so we do have a medical section in here, and we have a shock machine from the early 1900s that they would hook you up to this electric wire and shock you, and it was supposed to cure every ailment you had. And it was considered as absolute quackery. But one of the doctors here in the county had it. We also have an artificial hand from the 1920s.
Really?
And they called it the farmer's hand because generally farmers or ranchers would lose arms or hands before city people did.
The old farm equipment was not very OSHA approved.
Yeah, you're exactly right.
Now, is this, as long as we're here with the electric curlers, is this a hair dryer?
It is a hair
This
dryer.
looks like a bicycle helmet or a football helmet
Yeah.
stuck on a fan.
Yes, and it is a hair dryer. And as you can see, it's pretty narrow in the inside. So lots of times women's ears would get burned because so much heat came through it.
Even though they have the ventilation on the side for the ears.
Yeah, because the ears were down a little bit lower
okay.
than right here. So yeah, it's made very different because this is actually the side of your hair. So,
Okay.
And more washing machines and irons.
And
all
little
kinds
bed setups, you know,
Yes.
with a bedroom. You've got your dresser and your chair with the stuffed bears in it.
Right?
And a bed with I guess it would be brass, but it's probably more wrought iron that's
It's
painted
wrought
white.
iron. You're right.
And some clothes hanging on the partition wall. And then we go to the next little set, and we've got some rocking chairs. We've got an old radio, old phonograph that's a wind-up phonograph for the old 78 records. A clock on the wall. And then we have a kitchen setup that's got the wood stove, and you've got a porcelain doll, several rug beaters and dustpans and feather dusters.
Mm-hmm. And of course the White House cookbook. What old farmhouse wouldn't want a White House cookbook? It was pretty famous back in the day. And these glasses we actually got from an estate. And this elderly woman, the stems broke off her glasses, so she glued the stems into blocks of wood so the glasses would still stand up.
And we've got about a 3-inch by 3-inch block of wood with a stem drilled in it and glued in it for cups. I guess you didn't need coasters with these ones.
No, didn't need coasters.
Wow.
A variety of items. We had quite a lot of bands here in the county. A band was a big thing, and in 1905 at the fair, the Lewis and Clark Exposition, our Wallowa County band took second place of all the bands there, and we have a couple of the instruments that were taken to that exposition for our band to play.
Whatever happened to all those bands? I mean, every town, when you look at the old Norman Rockwell pictures and stuff, you see the bands in the parades and the bands in the gazebo down in the park and all that kind of stuff, and all that's gone. Yeah,
we still have quite a few small bands here. Some very famous musicians have come from here. If you're the people listening, look up Brady Goss. Brady Goss is an amazing musician who came from here, as is Cale Moon, and Cale Moon's Western. And Brady Goss plays like Jerry Lee Lewis.
Okay.
And he actually came from our small town, so we have a few musicians that have come out of this area still. And do they come back and play concerts in the park? Or? Yes, they do. Yes, okay, they do. And Joseph's really kind of converted itself into an artsy atmosphere. We have 3 foundries that are here now. The first foundry was started by Glenn Anderson, and it's called Valley Bronze. Glenn has since passed, but Valley Bronze is still casting fine art. And we have about a dozen sculptures on Main Street that were all cast here in town, and they're permanent on Main Street. Artists from all over the world have cast their fine art bronze here in our county. So we're very much an artsy town in a lot of ways. We have a vintage car show in August each year, art walks in September. There's always something going on. Wow. Yeah. Okay, and now we're to the medical display here. Yeah. We've got an old wheelchair, the old wicker wheelchair, and a couple of bed
hands, excuse me,
Yes, yes,
and your electric shock machine.
yes.
Wow. So you grabbed onto the handles and shocked away.
Yes, you did.
And the artificial hand. Now that's actually got fingers. I was expecting to see one of the metal hands that had the apparatus that worked from the shoulder.
Yeah, and if you look closely, the fingers are kind of like a slinky,
Yeah.
but they don't actually bend except for the thumb and the index finger. It's mostly for looks.
Well, what do you need besides an opposable thumb? They
That's
say
it.
that's what's made everything for us better.
Yeah, and the way it worked, it actually went to an arm, and there's a cord coming out of it that attached into the arm, and when you bent your elbow, it would make the index finger and the thumb come together so you could pick something up.
Okay.
So you could feed yourself, that type of idea. Yes.
But it looks like a hand, like you said, with just if you had a glove on,
Yeah,
you'd think that there was actually a hand on the inside.
right. It's pretty good looking for as old as it
It
is.
really is. And then
Yeah.
you've got a child's coffin,
Yep.
and it says never used.
Yes.
I'm glad that that's the case. Otherwise, that means it had to have been dug up first.
Right.
And you got that from a warehouse in Flora.
Yes, in Flora. We were talking about Flora earlier.
A little bit
yes.
earlier. And then this is an early X-ray reader.
Right, and we got that from Wallowa Memorial Hospital, and it's a very early X-ray film reader.
And when we say film reader, we're just talking about the glass with the light behind it that shows through so that you can see the X-ray
Right.
coming through. And then you were saying that you've got a kitchen display that you're in the process of working on.
Yes, our kitchen will be open for next summer season, and so people will be able to tour the old kitchen.
And this kitchen was used when it was a community hall, and then you said remodeled in the 20s?
Yes, in the 20s and used during the time the hospital was here. And there's actually a pass-through so they could pass food through to the patients in the other room. And quite a few cupboards. We do have a collection of all of the high school yearbooks from the county that
wow.
are right now stored in the kitchen. But by next summer, this will be a working kitchen for people to come see.
That's cool.
Yeah, with a wood-burning stove and the whole thing.
And then you've got a military, World War I military display that has some uniforms, a Navy uniform, Army uniform, pea coat,
Yeah.
Red Cross flag, and some sea rations. It's a small display, but it has quite a bit of stuff here.
Yes, yes. We had a lot of World War vets from here, and World War II, World War I and II, a few Civil War. There's a great monument in Enterprise in front of the courthouse to our war vets down there that people should stop and see as they're coming through Enterprise.
Okay. So is there other things that we're missing, or have we pretty much been through?
We've kind of traveled through, and we've glossed over a whole bunch of things. And
That we have.
And would love to have people come see us. We're open last week of May through the end of September each year. We're not open the winter months, but we're open the entire summer months, and it's a lot of fun to see.
Do you have a website that people can get on, and do you have pictures on the website?
We have a Facebook page.
Okay.
It's Wallowa County Museum on Facebook.
And spell Wallowa.
Wallowa.
Okay.
Wallowa, yes.
And okay, so Wallowa County
Museum.
Okay.
And it's a fun Facebook page. They can ask us for information, and we post about weekly unusual photos that we've found in the museum, things that people don't get to see on display.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
So it's a fun Facebook page.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, I really appreciate your time here, Jude. Take us through this and show us this museum. It's been fantastic talking with you. And the world is full of wonder.
Yes,
People
it is.
need to get out and explore and have a wonder-filled day.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?